Alright everyone, I promised I'd give it a dub review, and here it finally comes. The dub review of Dragon Ball Kai, or as it's called outside of Japan, Dragon Ball Z Kai. Now before I begin, I should address a few things regarding what this review will cover. For starters, this is reviewing the FUNimation English version of Dragon Ball Z Kai. Not the Ocean dub or any of the other English dubs that are for non-US territories. And in addition to Dragon Ball Z Kai, it will also be including the Buu saga of the show, which is known as the final chapters. So this review, when I say the final chapters, is in no way talking about the TV version of the Buu saga that aired in Japan, with a different opening and ending, as well as slightly different music placements at times. The dub that was done is based off the international version of the show, and as such will be compared to the Japanese version of the international release. Also, this review does not apply to the recent movies such as Battle of Gods or Resurrection F, nor does it apply to Dragon Ball Super, although all three of those were well dubbed. Maybe I'll talk about those some other time. So, with that in mind, let's start this review. First off, are the openings and endings left intact or dubbed in English? So here's the deal. In the initial run of Kai, the show had one opening in the form of Dragon Soul, and two ending songs called Yeah Break, Care Break, and Wings of the Heart. Then for the final chapters, they had an opening called Fight It Out, and an ending song called Never Give Up. Just a reminder that this is not talking about the TV broadcast version that had 5 endings and Kuzen Zetsu Go as the opening. So anyway, Funimation had all the songs be in English in a rather fun way. So the ending song Yeah Break Care Break was sung in English by Jerry Jewell. And the second ending, Wings of the Heart, was performed by Caitlin Glass, who you may know currently voices Vados in Super. As for Dragon Soul, we got multiple different dubs of this song provided by Goku, Raditz, Broly, Frost, Krillin, and Chaozu. Sean Schemmel, Justin Cook, Vic Mignogna, Greg Ayres, Sonny Strait, and Brina Palencia. And after that, we got them all singing it together. The final chapter's songs were already in English, so Funimation likely didn't see any reason to alter the song and kept them as is. All of these songs were shortened when aired on TV in different ways depending on the channel or station, but as you know, I don't fault dubs for doing this, as long as the releases aren't shortened, which they're not. So, are the openings and endings kept intact? I'm gonna say yes. Question 2. Is the background music left intact? Okay, so this one is kinda sticky, and not in any way due to the English dub. In fact, the problem here is entirely on the Japanese side of things. So, as you may recall, when the show first aired on TV, it had a composer by the name of Kenji Yamamoto, who was scoring the music in the Japanese version up until literally the last 2 episodes of the Cell arc. Right at that time, however, Kenji was discovered to have been plagiarizing a large amount of his music from other works. Most notably the war theme from James Cameron's Avatar, and the main theme from Terminator Salvation. Which, I'll admit, isn't the most unfitting choice of music to copy for a story arc about a guy from the future going to the past to warn the heroes about a cyborg apocalypse, but regardless, his actions were illegal and as a result, got fired. After this, Toei went back and replaced his soundtrack with that of Kikuchi, who composed the original run of Z. Now at this point, Funimation was just starting the Trunks arc, and had kept Yamamoto's music intact, and even gave us some great dubs of the vocal songs that were played. Looking at you, Ginyu Force rules. But because of the plagiarism, they weren't allowed to continue using his music. So this put Funimation in a real tight pinch. Do they wait until Toei provides them with the rescored Japanese version? Or do they go and use their own music that they made back in Z? Despite the fact that they were being aired on both Nicktoons and CW with a demand for more episodes, Funimation waited it out, despite it meaning a rather long delay for the networks to get new episodes. But in the end, Funimation was able to go in and use Kikuchi's music for the rest of the dub, as well as add it into the episodes that they already dubbed. So despite how tempting it may have been, Funimation did indeed keep the soundtrack. As for the final chapter's music, at this point they had an entirely new composer who is also doing Super right now, and of course his music, as far as I'm aware, is not plagiarized, so there isn't any issues with that, and they did indeed keep it the same as how it was for the international version. Once again, the international version and the TV broadcast in Japan does have different placements, though most of the music is similar or the same, just placed in different parts. But anyway, that soundtrack was kept. So, as far as the question, the answer is yes. Whew! That was a lot to say. On to the third question. Is it free of sloppy or unnecessary edits based on the network standards? Okay, so this dub aired on 3 different channels over in the US. First, it aired on Nicktoons, followed shortly behind by the CW time slot that belonged to 4Kids. And then it finally aired on Cartoon Network's Toonami block years later. Now, first off, I'm gonna be nice here and completely ignore the CW 4Kids version here because, let's be honest, that version is a joke at best. And I suspect that Funimation was not the ones that made those edits, seeing as what I think really happened was that CW was given the same version as Nicktoons, and from there left it up to 4Kids to figure out what else needed to be edited. So with that in mind, Blue Popo will not be faulted here. So with CW being removed from this, we have the Nicktoons dub and the one Toonami got to air. And right off the bat, the Toonami airing is completely uncut, so no problems there. As far as Nicktoons dub goes, this version was edited a bit to be a Y7 rating, which meant that some of the more violent moments like Frieza impaling Krillin had to be edited out. But even so, those edits were very small and understandable, not to mention the fact that it still allowed a lot of things, such as number 18 breaking Vegeta's arm and even showing that Krillin's armor clearly had a hole in it after Frieza attacked him. So, even if they didn't show the attack, they didn't deny that it happened. One edit I did find a bit odd or unfortunate, though, was when Goku was looking through the fridge during training for a drink, and he pulls out a can of beer that he turns down drinking due to it being bitter, and that the Nicktoons version decided to have the beer can wiped so that it would just look like a blank can, or of something that I guess he just decided not to drink. I was actually kind of surprised that Nicktoons turned down this opportunity, because, you know, they could have literally used this as a chance to tell the audience of children that, hey, look, Goku doesn't drink beer, and neither should you. But, on the other hand, I guess they decided that their standard was no showing any cans of beer in any context, regardless of the message, so I guess they just decided they didn't want it to appear, and I'm not going to really fault them for that. Other things changed for Nicktoons include removing the bad language and calling the world champion, known as Mr. Satan, Hercule. You know, just like the old dub did. Final Chapter's dub has so far only aired on Toonami and is completely uncut. Sadly, this even includes the filler scene of all the former villains watching Goku fight Boo down in Hell, despite this contradicting what we find out in Resurrection F of what Hell really looks like in Dragon Ball. Actually, would have been okay with that scene being cut, if I'm being honest. That aside, am I going to give them the point of this for being free of bad edits? HFIL, yes! Sorry, couldn't resist. Number 4, free of heavy Americanization. There really isn't much stuff that can be localized in this show, but all the Japanese foods like ramen and rice balls have been kept as is, and Japanese text hasn't been removed at all. So, I'm gonna give them this one, yes. Next, is an uncut version available to the public in some way? You can purchase both the original run of Kai and the final chapters legally on both DVD and Blu-ray in uncut format only. As far as I know, the edited version is for TV broadcast only, so the answer is yes. Next up, did this dub have good voices? So here's the deal. Sean Schemmel, Sonny Strait, Chris Sabat, and all the other voices that reprised their roles for Kai have at this point had over 10 years of experience not only voicing them in the original Z-dub, but also in countless video games and movies, so you can bet your ass that they've mastered playing these characters by now. And believe me when I say that these guys managed to give their best performances yet in this dub. Now granted, much like in the Japanese version, some of the characters had to be recast, often because the original voice was no longer available to play the part, or because the old voice was no longer considered fitting for the character. Or in many cases, because the character was played by Chris Sabat, who decided that he wanted to give other people the chance to play the character. No, seriously, look at how many roles he handed over. He still got to return as Vegeta, Piccolo, and some loser called Yamcha, but almost everyone else was recast. So let's talk about some of those replacements. Some of them, such as Gohan, Bulma, and 18, had to be replaced because the original voice had moved or was too busy with other stuff to return. And in these cases, the replacements have managed to be either hard to even notice, or managed to pull off an equally if not better performance for said character. Some roles, such as Frieza, were replaced not because the original voice wasn't available, but because they wanted to get a different take on the character. For example, even though Linda Young, the original voice of Frieza, was able to come back as Frieza, and even did in the first episode to provide a brief laugh, it was decided that the character should instead be played by Chris Ayres from this point on, and he did an amazing job as the character. By the way, a little side note, in case you hadn't heard, Chris Ayres is actually having some major health issues that make it impossible for him to continue voicing Frieza. His health insurance doesn't cover it, so if you would like to help him get that much-needed surgery so he can return in time for the Tournament of Power in Super, I would strongly urge you to donate. I'll leave a link in the description below for anyone interested. So anyway, aside from Frieza, many of the roles Sabat played, such as 3 of the 5 members of the Ginyu Force, were handed over to others. Sabat did, however, decide to return as the role of Recoome, among others, and these replacements managed to be a major improvement over the original. As far as people that did reprise their roles, most of the important characters from the original series, and even some we did not expect to come back, such as Kylie Bear and Damian Clark as older Gohan and Cell respectively, actually came back and gave it their best. So, with all this in mind, I am going to give them a big, huge yes! Number 7. Script handled well and free of obnoxious jokes added in, excessively bad translations, and otherwise unwanted rewrites. Even though the Japanese version literally reused the exact same script minus the filler from the original Z-run, the people at Funimation realized that the script from the original dub wasn't that good. So they decided to give us a brand new script that was far more accurate to the original, while also being a tad bit on the interpretive side of things. Now granted, some scenes had Japanese puns that just don't translate at all into English, like Goku trying to make King Kai laugh being replaced with the same puns that the original dub used, likely for the sake of nostalgia. While there was also, during the Cell games, that time when, after Goku finished fighting Cell, he decided to call for Gohan to take over, and the newscasters overheard him say Gohan and mistook originally him for saying that it was time for lunch because Gohan is Japanese for fried rice. But since that doesn't really make sense in English, they changed that pun to having them instead mishear him and think that he said to go on. But other than impossible to translate puns, it's pretty accurate. And of course, it's time to address the elephant in the room. I meant the whole elephant, not just the nose. The over 9,000 line that was heard on the edited for TV dubs. Seeing as the Uncut release and even the Toonami airing have Vegeta saying the accurate statement that it's over 8,000, I do not fault the dub for this, seeing as they clearly did it to be cute. And it was. Although I do find it odd that right before Vegeta says the line, the way Nappa asks is a little bit mixed up for the two versions. You see, for the edited TV dub, Nappa is a bit more talkative by saying, "Vegeta, what's wrong with you? Tell me what his power level is," followed by Vegeta screaming the over 9,000 line. While the Uncut dub has Nappa saying, "Vegeta, what's the scouter say about his power level?" to Vegeta saying in a less over-the-top manner that it's over 8,000. I can't help but wonder if Nappa's lines for the two dubs should have been switched, seeing as the actual meme has Nappa's line for the Uncut dub and Vegeta's line in the edited dub. But that aside, this over 9,000 rewrite is not a problem since the accurate version is out there. So as for the overall script being accurate, I'm gonna say yes. 8. All episodes dubbed, aired, and released to the public so far. No episodes skipped, merged, or otherwise missing. So for the original run of Kai, the final episode, episode 98, in which Trunks takes care of the androids and Cell in his timeline, was actually not aired in Japan due to the 2011 earthquakes that took place. So it was only released as a DVD bonus. For a while, it was assumed that when it completed its run on Nicktoons at episode 97, that Funimation decided to do what Japan did and only have 98 be a DVD thing. But then over a year later, Nicktoons decided to air that episode on TV. And since then, it's aired on Toonami as if nothing was different. The final chapters dub has been released in its entirety on Blu-ray and DVD and currently airs on Toonami, and I assume they will be airing all episodes, so nothing to report there. So to answer the question, yes. 9 free of name changes. Okay, this one is a little tricky, mainly because these names have some difficult translations at times. It's no secret that Toriyama loves to give characters names that have a theme pun. For example, Saiyans are all puns on vegetables, Namekians are musical instruments, and the Ginyu Force are all dairy products. Sometimes these puns are a bit lost or translated in a way that isn't quite ideal. And in some cases, like Krillin, the names use the L and R alliterations, or they omit the silent U for the names. However, for what it's worth, the dub fixed some of the not-so-good choices, such as going with Grand Elder instead of Guru, and the androids being more often referred to as cyborgs, and android being used a bit less often. Other than that, most of the names are kept the same, though I will admit that some of the choices for the names are not how I would have translated them, such as the Ginyu Force, who I would have done differently by trying to make the puns a bit more clear. Specifically, Burter would have been kept since the name is still a clear pun on the word butter, being that if you replace the first R with a T, then it spells butter. Then Jace, I would have gone with the manga's choice of calling him Jeez, which is spelled Jheese, as a play on the word cheese. Raccoon, I think, wasn't done right in either the dub or the manga, since his name is supposed to be an exact anagram of cream, with the literal Japanese translation of his name being Ri-ku-mu, as a pun on the Japanese word Kurimu. So I think the best way to translate that pun would have been to call him Recam, spelled R-E-C-A-M, and then Goldo doesn't really work in either version since he's a pun on the word yogurt, so I think they should have just called him Gert. And then Ginyu, it won't make sense to English speakers regardless of what you do to tweak it, so calling him Ginyu is fine, I guess. Now, other than the Ginyu Force, the other tweak I would have done was using the manga's naming choice for Deborah, which was calling him Dabra, since his name is supposed to be a play on the word abracadabra. And, obviously the phrase isn't abracadabra, so I would have probably called him Dabra. Other than that, though, no real harm was done. And, sorry if I got a little sidetracked just now. So, also, as far as Tien Shinhan goes, since, Ten Shinhan to Tien Shinhan, they just made it so that part of his name was his last name, so I guess no real problems there. And then, the Mr. Satan Hercule thing also isn't a factor because the name Hercule was only used on the edited TV version, and this was done as a censorship issue. So that, of course, doesn't count, and the uncut version stays with Mr. Satan at all times. So I'm not going to take off that one. So, as far as the question of whether it's free of name changes, I'm going to say yes. And finally, overall, is it watchable? Guys, this dub is probably one of the best Funimation has ever done. It is the complete opposite in quality of the old Z dub. The actors are at their absolute best, the script is great, and the directing is amazing. I honestly can't praise this dub enough. If there was any criticism I have of this overall dub, it's that the vocal songs are inconsistent in that they started off by being dubbed in English, but then after Ginyu Force Rules, stuck to being in Japanese. But I suspect that the reason for this was likely due to licensing issues that Funimation couldn't do anything about and was therefore not their fault. Other than that, this dub is an absolute thrill, so yes, 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 this dub is very much watchable. Would you look at that? This dub got a 10 out of 10, a perfect score. Funimation did an amazing job with this dub, so much so that many have even called it better than the subs. And I can see why. If you can, I would absolutely suggest that you buy the DVD and catch the final chapters on Toonami when it's on. Oh, and once again, if you can, I hope you consider helping Chris Ayers out. Link in the description. を閉じるな今受けて立つ恐怖を解き放て戦いの後に残されるのは虚しさと知ってても Get a chance 俺がぶち切りそうさ極限超えのエナジー炸裂スーパードラゴンソウル熱い奇跡を残せ宇宙のパワー高めてゆけ魂の正義を誰も壊せやしない愛に満ちた命に触れたその手で未来を守れマジだぜスーパードラゴンソウル大地切り裂いてゆく